All right, and we can get going. So, welcome to the next 1848 Properties webinar. This one is a new approach to kitchen operations. I'm Thomas Lovejoy, Director of Graduate Involvement, but this is going to be mostly presented by Steve Bocher, President of 1848 Properties, and Adam Guy, who's the President of Upper Crust Food Services, our new preferred partner at 1848 Properties. So, I'll hand it off to Steve and let you guys go.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Brothers, welcome to the webinar. As you may know, an important part of 1848 Properties, Inc. work is to provide you with resources and support that will enable you to elevate your already successful chapter house operations to the next level. This presentation is actually a result of one of the initiatives to support you, and that is the creation of a network of preferred providers that you can choose to work with. We anticipate having probably 4 to 6 different categories of providers identified for you by mid-year, likely including areas like fundraising companies, architects, property management companies, among others. So before we get started in this webinar, let me start and acknowledge that we have our entire 1848 Properties Board participating on this call. And I just want to recognize and thank these brothers for their service to 1848 Properties and Phi Gamma Delta. We have Pete Welsh, our treasurer, Jim Lee, our secretary, and Josh Hawley, an at-large board member, and of course also serving as on the Archon board. One of the things as we get this kicked off, I wanted to also mention is that if you have questions, we are excited to try to answer those. You can type those in. I believe you have a area on your screen to do that, and we'll try to answer them either at the appropriate time in the presentation or at the end of the presentation. So let me thank Adam for joining me tonight, and let's get this going. So our goals for this session include providing you with an update on 1848 Properties. I already introduced you to our new preferred partner program. So let's introduce you to Upper Crust Food Service. Adam, why don't you give a quick intro?
Sure. Thank you very much for allowing us to be on the call today. We're really excited about our partnership with 1848 Properties and Fiji. Nobody was more excited than my dad. He's is a Fiji alum from the University of Missouri. I won't tell you what year. He might get mad at me for that. But he was excited about this partnership as well. So we appreciate the opportunity. Upper Crust Food Service, we are a food service provider, kitchen management provider for fraternity and sorority houses. We're based in Columbia, Missouri. This next school year will be our 10th school year that we have been in business, specifically doing one job, and we live and breathe fraternity and sorority food service. That's all that we do every day, and so we kind of have grown organically. We started at the University of Missouri, where we were based, and we have sort of grown by word of mouth, and we now serve chapters nationwide. We have chapters basically from coast to coast, and we've built our management network in such that there really aren't any campuses that we can't touch or get to rather quickly. So in a nutshell, we manage your restaurant for you. That's kind of an interesting analogy to put, but basically you are running a restaurant inside of your fraternity house. And so most of us don't really want to be in the restaurant business. If you know anything about it, you certainly don't want to be in the restaurant business. And so we sort of take all of the headaches off of your plate and operate that for you. So as we go through the webinar, I'm sure there'll be more information about our company and certainly open to any questions that people have. But we're excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity, Steve.
Well, great. Thanks, Adam. That was great. So let's kick this off, and we'll go through and ask some questions that hopefully will be useful to our chapters and house corporations around the country. I guess the first question is, why should I consider using an outside company versus hiring and managing a chef internally?
Absolutely. So, as a lot of us on this call know, the traditional model for kitchen management has been that the local corporation board or students, depending on how involved the corporation board is in the chapter, typically will hire and manage the kitchen on their own. And this worked really well. This model worked really well over the years. And I think that for the most part, groups were able to find a chef that in many cases would work many years on end for their chapter and almost become a staple or a fixture within the house. And those were the good old days of kitchen management, back when employees wanted to stay at a job long term, and back when you could really rely on somebody to come to work every day and do what was expected of them. And it sort of allowed the corporation boards to take a hands-off approach to the kitchen as long as they hired the right chef. And that was kind of the old way of doing things. And what's happening now in this new age is that the kitchen has become much more difficult to manage. Employees, unfortunately, are not as loyal as they used to be. A lot of the chefs, if they call themselves a chef these days, especially on our younger chefs, they're looking for a lot of job experience. And so when you look at their resumes, you're going to see people who have worked somewhere for a year, 2 years, and then move on to something else. And so this longevity in the kitchen is something that's kind of something that's now stuck in the past. And so as our long-term chefs start retiring, or as our chapters grow and maybe outgrow the ability of some of these cooks that are in our kitchens, it sort of created a new industry. And that new industry is basically outsourcing your kitchen management. And so this has been a really interesting thing for us to watch. I would say probably 5 to 7 years ago, this was a relatively new idea for many chapter houses. They might have been hearing about this for the first time. Oh, I didn't know this was an option to be able to do that. And now we're seeing that it's kind of gone from beyond just being an option to sort of being something that everybody is starting to accept as this is going to be the wave of the future. This is going to be the way that things are going to be. And there's becoming less and less argument about whether or not we should outsource just based on the liability and staff stability and things of that nature. So the main points that we usually tell people, the reasons why food service management is a good option to consider, is number one, staff stability. If you're managing your chef, and this day and age, your chef is going to change every few years, that's really difficult, especially when you have undergraduates who are living in the house for 1, 2, maybe 3 years at the most, and you have officer changes on an annual basis. It really makes it difficult to manage that kitchen if you have any change over in staff. And so having staff stability with a company allows you to basically have one point of contact, being the company, who manages any of that turnover that may occur. We're also able to offer benefits. We're able to offer dental and health and benefits to staff that maybe if you had 1 or 2 employees, you wouldn't be able to offer on a corporation board level. So we're able to offset some of that from a stability standpoint. Another piece is budget certainty. When you talk about a budget in a kitchen, it's a variable cost if you're doing your own kitchen operation, because the cost of the food is going to be determined by the chef who's ordering the food. And you also don't have any control over your vendors. I think one thing that people don't realize is that the fraternity and sorority industry, for food distribution companies like US Foods, Cisco, Gordon, companies like that deliver the raw products, the fraternity and sorority market is their number one margin business in the country, meaning that they make more percentage of profit per case that they sell to fraternity and sorority houses than any other group that they sell to, restaurants, casinos, hotels, you name it. And the reason is because whoever's receiving that product, generally speaking, doesn't have a great knowledge about the restaurant industry. So you might have a house director that checks your invoices, or you might have an undergraduate who is paying that bill. And how many undergraduates do we know that know how much a case of romaine lettuce should cost, right? Let alone, one head of it at a grocery store. So, this budget certainty, having a contract and having a price that you can budget on, is a really big reason why we're seeing a lot of people switching over. Liability is one of the big issues. We take over all the employees. We do not 1099 any employees. So all of our employees are salaried, or I'm sorry, not salaried, but they are, they're 1099 employees. They are not contract. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. So they're not contract labor. We have actually seen a big increase in audits for fraternity houses and sorority houses when it comes to kitchen help, because if your kitchen staff is not, if their full-time job, the majority of their job is not managing, if the majority of their job is cooking, they actually are not being considered an exempt employee right now, according to most of the labor laws. And so a lot of people who are paying their chef a fixed rate per week, which is the way most people are paying, if you get audited, you're going to get dinged for that because of the overtime that needs to be paid at time and a half. So we understand all those things. We stay on top of that liability. We also take over the workers' compensation insurance, which is a big piece. We have a lot of good friends in this industry, obviously on the insurance side of things. And they continually tell us that most of their claims from a workers' compensation standpoint are coming from the kitchen. And so for us to be able to reduce that liability, is a really big deal. Accountability, I think this is huge. We all talk about accountability in the fraternity world. We want to hold our students accountable for things and members accountable for things that they do at the house. But this also allows you, when you partner with a food service company, it allows you to hold them accountable. So obviously it's a contractual relationship. We want to maintain that contract. And so it gives you a chance to have a one point person that you can go to and say, hey, here's an issue that we're seeing, or here's something we'd like to see done. And then the company is responsible for making those things happen, as opposed to having you have to manage a relationship, which oftentimes can get political within a house. If the men like the chef and we don't want to hurt his feelings, you can allow us to not hurt his feelings, but to say, hey, in a constructive way, hey, chef, here's some things we need to work on and some things we need to be better at. Obviously, awesome food is a reason that you should switch. I think that, we live and breathe food, and so that's a really important piece to this. Communication is a super important piece. We've kind of already covered that. And also on the cutting edge technology, there's not a house out there independently that's going to be able to offer the technology that a food service company does. And a good example of that is that all of our houses have a mobile app. It's a free download that the students can use, and they can basically view their menu from their smartphone. And so they can be sitting in class or leaving class and going home and saying, hey, I wonder what's for dinner tonight, open up their app, and they can see what's on the dinner menu. They can see that menu for the next couple of weeks even, to plan out meals that they may want to come to the house for. They can also sign up for late plates directly from their phone that goes to an iPad in the kitchen. So if they're in class and the cute girl next to them says, hey, do you want to study tonight? And they're going to miss dinner, then they can click late plate, and when they come back to the house after studying, their late plate will be in the refrigerator for them, and they don't have to call their buddy at the house and sign up on a sheet of paper. Dietary preferences are also recorded inside the app. So if we have any students, which a lot of times people think this isn't a big deal in fraternity houses, but we are seeing an uptick in folks that have maybe want to eat vegetarian, or that are gluten intolerant, or maybe just have an allergy to shellfish. These are all things that we want to know and we want to take seriously. And so they can fill out their profile on this app, and they can also review the meals, which is really nice. So after every meal, they can review the meal and tell us what they like and what they dislike. And lastly, because communication is so important, they can crave things. And this means they can hit one button on their phone and tell us what they want us to add to the menu for future menus. What are they craving today? And so it just really is a great opportunity for us to use technology in a way that, as everyone on this call knows, the students are face in their phone all day long. So we figured out a way to kind of communicate with them and customize the meal program. So those are kind of the main reasons why people are now choosing to go from independently running their situation to hiring a company. And it really comes down to asking yourself that honest question of, can we do as good of a job and offer as many features to our men by doing this independently as we can hiring and outsourcing this?
Yeah, that's great, Adam. And I think it's also maybe touch on what you've seen. I think there's got to be a huge difference when you're able to offer a chef a benefit package, the caliber of individual that's interested in the position.
Oh, absolutely. We tell people every day we have the best chef jobs available in the country. And I think most people on this call would agree with that, even as if you've been searching for a chef or gone through that process. I mean, here's an opportunity to hire a chef who more than likely has worked in a restaurant, hotel, casino, something like that, where they've worked a lot of late nights and they've worked a lot of weekends and they have worked a lot of Easter and Christmas buffets, right? And so we're able to go and find these folks who have families, who are looking for a work-life balance, and we're able to say to them, hey, here's a great job for you with no late nights, very few weekend hours, and paid time off during holidays. It really doesn't get much better than that. And so to add to that, to say to them, hey, you're immediately eligible for our benefits program as well, we've found that that is a really big winner in terms of recruitment. And so what we do is we actually have a national network that we work on, and in many cases, we'll even have people relocate to take jobs within our system when we take on new houses. But worst case scenario, we're getting some of the best talent within that community because of the way that we're selling the job to them. And then they stay for a long time, which is really great. We've actually had a few chefs over the years who have gotten an opportunity to maybe make a little bit more money, let's say, and maybe they move to a retirement home, and 6 months later, they're calling us back saying, hey, do you have another opening? Do you have anything for me? And then they stay for a really long time. So I think it's, it's one of those things where these are great jobs, and we need to realize that we are, you guys are providing a great opportunity for these chefs to have a wonderful job with good benefits.
And Adam, I think the other thing, and brothers, that I think is important about this opportunity, this approach, is the time that you've been spending on HR, on accounting, on payroll. Not only there's certainly the question of, are we staying, is that our area of expertise, and are we, as Adam mentioned, complying with, wage and hour laws and rules and HR laws and rules. But this frees up your time from those kinds of duties to focus on things that can add more value to the men and the fraternity housing experience. So I think this is pretty exciting. Adam, one other thing I think that's interesting, maybe touch on for a second, is that I think there was sort of a before this concept got more common, if you will, and it's I guess we could call it common, could we now,
Yes.
where we are,
Yes.
that I think chapters sort of had a choice. It was like before companies like Upper Crust were here, well, we can use the on-campus food program, and they can truck in a plate of or a tray of food that we can serve, and now this opportunity really bridges that, and maybe speak to the groups that maybe are currently bringing in food that's just being warmed and served, and why this approach might be a better one.
Well, there's no doubt. We've learned a lot in the 10 years of this business, and early on in this business, being an entrepreneur, that's basically my culinary background is being an entrepreneur, which means I don't have a culinary background. I've hired some really amazing chefs and people with great culinary backgrounds who lead that part of our team. But in my mind, as an entrepreneur, I thought to myself, hey, this will be great. We'll find one house on a campus that has the best kitchen, and then we'll hire the best chef in town, stick them in that house, and we'll cook food for other houses, and we'll ship the food out, and we'll stick it into the house. We'll put it on their buffet, and they'll eat great food, and we'll be able to really be streamlined with this process, more like a caterer would be, right, where you prepare it and bring it. What we have realized over the years, and the reason why that did not work for us in the early days, was because this business is more about relationship than it is about the food. And that doesn't mean that you don't want to have great food. We have to have great food. But the relationship aspect of this is even more important. And having that chef in your house that's actually cooking those meals, where the brothers can wake up in the morning and smell the bacon cooking and come down and talk about the date they had last night or the test they have next week, and sort of have this camaraderie in the kitchen. That is what we realized was kind of the secret ingredient. And so when we look for our chefs, we're looking for chefs who are interested in that front of house experience. And what I mean by that is, in a typical restaurant, you have the back of house, which is the kitchen, and the front of house, which is the servers and the managers who deal with the customers. So typically speaking, you've got a lot of great chefs who work in the kitchen who do not deal with customers very well, but they can put out a great plate of food. But there's a reason they're in the kitchen and they're not serving. And so what we have to find is we have to find that chef who puts out the great food, but that also enjoys the interaction with the guest, because now there is no front of house in the fraternity house. You know, they have to be the back of house and the front of house. So what we found is that having that food cooked in your house and having that relationship be built is far superior to having even the best caterer in town bringing you food, even if it's a great quality product. And it's not to say that we will not entertain bringing food in. We will do that if we have a house on campus that does not have a kitchen that's up to code or that can be cooked out of. That's a little bit different situation, because you just have to set the expectations. If the brothers know there's no chance that food can be cooked in my house, then catering in is not a bad option, because it's really your only option at that point. But we really do prefer, obviously, and see a lot more success with the in-house chef model.
Great. Well, hey, let's jump to another question. You know, we've talked about this model and how it's different. Obviously, one of the questions is going to be, you know, for I hope all of our chapters at some point, but for some, certainly they operate their kitchen as a profit center. So the question obviously on their minds is this going to be more expensive to have an outsider run our kitchen?
Sure. And that would be, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about bringing on a food service company, is a lot of people have kind of moved past, is it a good idea to have a food service company? I think that most people agree, yes, this is a good idea to have somebody managing my kitchen for me. But then it comes down to the finances and saying, hey, it might be a great idea, but it's going to be way more expensive than what we're doing now. And I don't have an exact percentage to put on this. There are a few chapters, a very small handful, who run their kitchens so efficiently that outsourcing would cost more money. But the reality is I'd say 95% of the chapters that we do proposals for and that we end up working with, we come in at the same price as what they're spending currently, or in many cases, we can even save them some money. And most of that comes back to the fact that we are ordering on a national level. So we're ordering millions and millions of dollars worth of food from our purveyors, which in turn, we're getting a better deal than a single drop for one fraternity house. In addition, we also have a streamlined operation. We know what we're doing. We do this for a living. We know how to work hours of the employees, make sure that everything's running efficient from a staffing level. There's been many cases where we walk into a kitchen, and because there isn't an on-site manager there, and this typically happens more in the sorority side than the fraternity side, but there's been many times I walked into a kitchen 2 weeks ago of a kitchen we were taking over, and I met an employee. I said, hi, my name's Adam. What do you do? And he said, well, I do the salad bar. And I said, oh, that's great. What else do you do? Well, that's it. I just do the salad bar. And so this house had staffed a chef to do breakfast, a chef to do lunch and dinner, a chef to do the salad bar, somebody else to do the dishes. And the reality was, the reason they did it was because the employees told them that's what they needed to get the job done. And there was no one there to verify, is that accurate? Is that not accurate? And so they ended up with 4 or 5 people working in a kitchen that really was a 2-person operation to put out the same quality. And so if managed properly, that's another way that we can come to the table and save some money for you. Lastly, we want our houses to be a profit center. We want the kitchen to be a profit center. And the way that we set that up is that we are going to charge you a per semester rate per man. and we're going to have one plan for the in-house men, and then we can have multiple plan options for out-of-house men. And so what that does is that guarantees you that that rate is going to be your rate that you pay. So you can basically choose now how much profit you want to make. No longer do you have to wait until the end of the semester to see how much you spent in food and labor and workers' comp and all the other miscellaneous expenses of the kitchen. You can now guarantee your profit from the beginning of the semester. So we'll use easy numbers. If we're charging $1,000 per man per semester, you can charge $1,250 per semester per man, and you have a guaranteed profit of $250 per man as a profit center. And what we recommend is we recommend you looking, one thing that we have not done well as an industry, fraternity and sorority, is we've not done a good job of keeping up with what the prices are for meal plans on campus. Okay, so we focus a little bit more on the competitiveness between the fraternities and sororities, which obviously is important. But as a whole, we all need to be looking to the university, because there's no reason, if the university is charging $2,000 a semester for a meal plan with 15 meals on it, that we should be charging $1,000 for that same meal plan. Now, granted, there might not be quite as many options available in the fraternity house as there is in the cafeteria, but there's got to be a happy medium there somewhere where we can still show value to the parents and say, look, this is less than what you would spend in the dorms, and then also be able to pad your profit margin at the house.
And
that's great. And
Steve, can I? And
I think the other. Okay, go ahead.
Can I interject and just launch a poll? I'm going to launch a poll so everyone who's looking can vote on this poll, and then you guys can keep discussing. But I'll just launch it on your screens right now.
Great, thank you, Thomas.
Yep.
Hey, and I think the other one quick point before we move on, Adam, is when we talk about this being the same cost or lower than what they were paying, brothers, we have to recognize that that same cost is not the same value, because that same cost doesn't require you to be doing payroll, to have payroll service, to have accounting and HR function tracking. And of course, it's an elevated level of service, including, of course, all the benefits to the employee that are going to be covered. So same is in some ways, I think, Adam, a misnomer, because same is still a savings to the chapter.
Yes, I think it's important when you evaluate your budget that you do look at all of those things that are outside. Like most of us would say, okay, here's what I spend on food, here's what I spend on labor. But a lot of the things that you just mentioned, sometimes it's disposables and chemicals and linen service for towels and aprons and mats. Your workers' compensation insurance, your liability. We also take out a liability policy. And list each chapter that signs a contract with us. We list their specific address and location as additionally insured. So many times you can go back to your provider and say, hey, we have this coverage in the kitchen. How does this affect us on our premium? So there's just a lot of ways that you can look at this, but you do want to make sure you're evaluating all those costs when you're comparing, a proposal you might receive from us versus what you're actually spending in the kitchen.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, let's move on. And I think one of the common questions that's got to come up is, we've got a long-standing relationship with our chef. We like him or her. Can we keep using them and still have Upper Crust take over our food service operation?
Yes, and so the answer to that is yes. There are a few things that need to happen in order for yes to be the answer, and the main one is that we have to have someone that's willing to become part of a new team, and somebody that's enthusiastic and really cares about the house. I think that if this chef that you have now really cares about the best interest of the men in the house and sees a program that's going to bring a lot of extra resources into the kitchen to assist them and to put out a better product, then they're going to be on board with this. If they're not on board with looking at something like this, then we really have to look at, where do their interests lie? Is it the interest of the brothers, or is it the interest of, me, the chef? And so I think that the main thing for us is that we can provide training. We can provide all the resources. Like I said, we can provide the benefits. We do a really good job, I think, of showing what the benefits are to the employee. So many times, like I'll give you one example, an employee who's independently working in a fraternity house, let's say that they have a death in their family and they need to be gone for 3 or 4 days. Well, they may not treat that the same way independently because they know the men just can't eat for 3 or 4 days. So they may miss part of that process with family, or that you guys might have to order pizza and sandwiches while they're gone for 4 days. Well, if they work for a company like Upper Crust, then we're going to send in a training chef, send another chef from campus, send a manager in to take over for them while they're gone. And so it sort of gives some stability and some ability to be part of a team to these independent employees who are kind of on this island on their own if they're not part of this team. It gives them a chance to call a manager if they have a problem. It gives them a chance to have access to all these great recipes and menu ideas. It gives them instant feedback from the app that they would have never received before. So it really, I think that the answer is yes, we can bring them on. We can keep them at the same pay rate. We can do all of those things. So for the employee standpoint, it should only be a benefit to come on. I think really where it lies in the final decision is in the attitude of the employee and whether or not they're willing and don't look at it as, oh, hey, they're bringing these guys in because they don't like my food. It's really, we have to present it in a way that, no, this is an opportunity for you to have more resources available to you. And frankly, the other thing is that it gives them an opportunity for upward mobility that they might not have. There aren't any promotions available being the chef of a fraternity house. You are the chef of the fraternity house, and that's kind of the ceiling if you want to continue at that job. And so not that we would want to take one of your chefs and take them out of your kitchen, but it gives them a chance to have that ability for maybe turning it into a career 5 years down the road if they do a really great job for us, which most of our corporation boards would support if that was something that was good for them. So on the flip side of this, the only thing that we would tell you is if you did hire us and your employee did not come on board and did not want to live up to the standards that we promise you in our contract, then we would bring a training chef in to work with them for a period of time to try to cure that. And if over that period of time it wasn't cured, then we would put somebody else in place that would be able to uphold those standards. But we would certainly give them every chance to prove themselves. And we have a lot of success stories from folks that have come on that have done that. And so, I don't know if I have a percentage off the top of my head here of how many work out and how many don't, but at the end of the day, the end customer is always a lot happier after the transition, which is great.
And I bet, Adam, you've got a number of stories too where people thought their current chef was fantastic. It didn't work out. And when they found a new chef that you bring in and the food changes, they realize that perhaps their standard or expectation wasn't high enough. Isn't that right?
Well, absolutely. I'll give you an example. In one of our southern schools, I was just actually there a week and a half ago, and we knew we were up against a battle with this particular transition because the men in the house actually had T-shirts made with the picture of their chef on them. So they had made T-shirts for a deal, and so this guy was on, literally, they were walking around the fraternity house with pictures of the chef. And the reality is that once we, the board had decided, hey, the kitchen isn't clean enough. We've seen the quality of the food that's going out, and we know it's not what it needs to be. But this particular gentleman had a really great relationship with the men, and so they were willing to overlook some of those things. So when the corporation board finally said, hey, we need to make a change, just if anything, for health and sanitary reasons, right? This is becoming a liability. We knew we were up against something there. And I kid you not, it was after, I think, the third meal that we served in the house that we did not hear the old chef's name again. and we've been in there now since the semester break, and we haven't heard this gentleman's name again. The reviews are consistently 5 stars, and so it's amazing what really good food will make you, kind of forget about some of those relationship pieces pretty quickly, because, food is it's a big deal to us, and when they realize the difference, it certainly allows that transition to be a little bit easier.
Well, speaking of food, that's a great segue to our next question, which is, what if our food quality isn't all that good? Can we really expect better from this program?
And also, I'm going to add to that question. We got a written question that mentioned you haven't spoken about health, food safety, or sanitation yet. So can you kind of add that question into your response?
Sure, absolutely. So from a food quality standpoint, the real answer to that is that we have to customize a meal program for every house. We talked a little bit earlier about things that we would have done differently, that we tried from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Another thing that we thought was a great idea in our first couple of years of business was to create a menu for the entire semester and have it be a rotation menu, so that we knew there was tons of variety, so that we knew that guys weren't eating chicken 2 nights in a row, and say, you know what, every fraternity we have, here's your menu. And what we realized really quickly with that was that every single house on every single campus has a different flavor profile. And not only do they have a different flavor profile, but that profile changes from semester to semester as new men move in the house, move out of the house, from first semester to second semester when they're getting ready to go on spring break. There's just such a difference in the way that these guys eat. And so what we have done now is we've gone to creating menus 2 weeks at a time. And the chef in the house has full autonomy to create the menus based on the feedback from the men in the house. And so we, of course, have a great library of menu ideas and suggestions and things like that for the chefs. But at the end of the day, they're using the feedback from the app and the verbal feedback with the men in the house to create these menus. And so from a quality standpoint, a lot of times it starts with serving what the men want, because you can serve a really high quality piece of salmon, and if the men in the house don't like fish, that's going to be a thumbs down meal, even though you spent a lot of money on it and prepared it perfectly. So I think that quality is kind of one of those weird words that you really have to realize. A lot of times it has more to do with having the right variety for the men, and also having the right portion size. So what we a lot of times we say in our company, we say, fraternities eat and sororities dine. And it's just kind of an analogy between the two, is that fraternity guys want that protein, they want to eat, they want to have a lot of food available, whereas the sororities might be looking for more variety on their salad bar. Is more important to them, and the colors that are being used in the dessert at the end of the buffet. And so we have to know that and understand that and train our chefs on that, so that they're putting out enough food. So not only is it good quality, but also do we have enough to satisfy all the men, so that they're not going to Subway at 11 o'clock at night because they're still hungry. And then you in turn have parents calling you halfway through the semester saying, why is my son going to Subway 4 nights a week when I'm paying for a meal plan? And so I think, that's an important piece as well. So it's really all about feedback. In terms of the quality of the food that we expect from our chefs, we're going to make everything from scratch that we can. Obviously, there's some limitations to that based on your individual kitchen and the equipment that you have. But as long as you have the basic kitchen equipment, we're going to be able to make stuff from scratch. And so it's as simple as the difference between having chicken tenders on a Friday, having them be frozen from a box, or having them be hand battered chicken tenders. There's a huge difference in quality there. There's also a huge difference in the amount of work it takes to do that. But there's also a huge difference in the cost, right? It costs us a lot less to make a higher quality product. And so that's what we encourage our folks to do. From the sanitation standpoint, we take responsibility for the cleanliness and sanitation of your kitchen. That's a huge part of our program. So we have checklists that our chefs have to work through in terms of the daily cleaning, the weekly cleaning, and then of course the deep cleaning that's done at the end of each semester. We actually, I'm sure some of you guys can probably find this humorous, but in our fraternity houses, it's a requirement that we actually take multiple photos of the inside of the kitchen after we do a semester shutdown, because we did receive a call once about 3 years ago from a fraternity house that said, man, you guys left this kitchen a mess at the end of the semester. And so we called our chef up, and he says, well, here's the pictures I took of the kitchen. Well, come to find out, a couple of the local guys who stayed in town over break gained access to the kitchen. And so they started cooking for themselves over the winter break. And so I think that, that's important to us, is making sure that we're held accountable, but that we also kind of document what it is that we're doing so that your corporation board has that information. And then the health scores, every school is different. Some schools, communities consider our houses to be residences, and so the local health department does not inspect. If that's the case, Upper Crust Food Service will inspect. We have policies and procedures in place that we're still going to inspect that kitchen when our regional directors come through town, even if it's not a requirement from the city that you live in. Most times, either the city or the university will have someone that's going to come in and do that health score. Our goal is to pass those with flying colors, and if there are any issues, to clean those issues up quickly. The biggest issue that we see with cleanliness and health inspections typically has to do with the equipment in the kitchen, because sometimes we are dealing with equipment that sometimes is getting older. And so one thing that's nice about having us in the kitchen is that we can communicate these things to your board in a quick manner. And then not only can we say, hey, there's an issue with the refrigeration, we can say, here's the issue and here's a solution should you choose to want to go this route. And I think that corporation boards really appreciate that, because at the end of the day, most everybody on this call has a full-time job. I'm on the corporation board of my fraternity, and every year we vote to double all of our pay. And so zero times 2 has continued to be 0 every year, but we still vote every year on that. And so, you guys have stuff that you need to do, and so searching for a new refrigerator or for a part is not something that's high on your priority list. So allow us to do that for you so that we don't have issues with the health department when they come in.
Well, hey, let's continue on this quality of food and food issue and talk about menu and things like adding hot breakfasts or supporting rush events or parents' weekends and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're seeing on your screen right now are screenshots from our mobile app. And so on the far left there, you can see a meal rating that came in for turkey and feta cheese wraps. And then they can also put their comment in, loved how healthy this was, yay for spinach. The other thing that's nice about this app is it's not anonymous. So these members actually have to put in their name, and so we took the names out of these pictures, but we're going to know who it is that's submitting this feedback. Now that doesn't mean that we go to them and say, hey, why did you rate dinner 1 star? What's wrong with you? But it does add some accountability so that somebody can't just go on and say something without having some accountability behind it. And so that's nice. We also have the Crave button, which is listed over on the far right. You can see where they could view their current menu, to do their late plates, or click Crave. And we get, hundreds and hundreds of Craves, and those go directly every day, and those go directly to the chef where they bank those, and basically as they're creating their menu, start to put those into their menu design. And the biggest thing is that communication, when a member says, this is something I'd like to see, and then a week and a half later, they see it on the menu. I mean, that's huge. That's huge from as everybody on this call knows, the men move out of their house. It's the first time they don't have their parents telling them what to do. And they want to be in charge. I'm sure all of us can relate to that. They want to feel like they're in charge of their own destiny here. And so we just feel like this open communication that we've created has really helped the students to feel like they do have some ownership and they can have an opinion when it comes to what it is that they're going to eat. When it comes to your meal plan, you can sort of add and take away from it as you please. Most people don't do that unless it's at a semester break, but we have had a lot of chapters who start with, let's say, continental breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and things are going so well at the house, and attendance is so far up at the meals that the guys are like, hey, we'd love to have eggs cooked to order and a hot breakfast. And with our company, that's as easy as a phone call or an email to our office, and we can change your meal plan mid-semester, at semester, however you want to do that, to add things like a hot breakfast. Or maybe it's that we only want to have hot breakfast on Friday, right? Turn breakfast and lunch into a brunch and do something like that. Those are all things that we can do. A lot of groups are finding that a Sunday night dinner is really well attended. So maybe you start with just 14 meals with nothing on the weekend, and then you find out, hey, let's add a Sunday night meal, and we find out our attendance is just as good or better on Sunday night than it is Monday through Thursday. And it allows the guys to get a meal at the end of a long weekend when they've kind of been scrounging around for food the whole weekend, right? It gives them something to come back to know they've got one good hot meal at the end of the weekend to get them ready and kind of focused on school. So all of those things are things that we can adjust. We can also adjust your numbers. So that's important. So if you sign a contract with 50 men on a meal plan, you're not paying for 50 men if you have 3 of those guys study abroad second semester. So that's as simple as we bill once a month. And as long as you let us know before the month starts that you're going to have a different number on your meal plan, then we can adjust your billing. We adjust our budgets internally, and we move forward. So it's as simple as that. So there's a lot of flexibility here. And I think that most of us would have to admit if we wanted to add a hot breakfast to our independent chef halfway through the semester, we're probably not going to do that because it's probably going to cause some problems or it's going to be difficult to pull off.
Yeah, you bet. That's great. So let's go to the next slide and talk about special things. I think you already really talked about late plates and how that works, but talk about things like tailgates, rush events. How does that work with Upper Crust?
Sure. So we love doing special events. To be honest with you, it gives us kind of a break. It kind of breaks up the monotony of having, the same type of meal service at breakfast, lunch, and dinner every night. We like to tell our chefs, hey, this is your chance to show off when somebody wants to do a special event. It's certainly going to cost groups that contract with us less to have us cater an event than it is to hire a local caterer. Main reason being that our labor is already there. A lot of the food products are in the kitchen already, spices, things like that we would need. And so we love the opportunity to do tailgates, rush events. We love making the guys look good on Mom's Weekend and putting out a really great, breakfast buffet for the moms on Sunday morning, doing a big tailgate for Dad's Weekend, doing a Founder's Day, all of those types of things. And so what we normally do from a pricing standpoint is we'll find out from the men or from the alumni board, what is your budget? And from that point, we can sort of create a menu around that budget. Another way that we can do it is to create multiple menus at maybe 2 or 3 different budget ranges. So you can kind of pick a good, better, best scenario to be approved. So we have heard out there in the past that there are some groups that do what we do that don't get excited about special events. They'll even limit people to a certain amount of special events in a given year. And we encourage them. We love them, and we love being a part of all those things. And for us, we also like the stability it creates for us when the moms, who are most of which, helping to fund maybe the payment of the meal program for the student, when they come and get to meet the chef face to face and get to try their food, it certainly helps to offset complaints as well when the parents get to try this great food and actually get to see what it tastes like.
That's great. So let's we've talked about food, we've talked about food quality, the chef, we've talked about the great app and the technology that you use. Let's talk a little bit about pricing. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot because obviously we all know that there's regional differences in food costs and things that can impact pricing. But can you share in a general sense what a cost for a better and best kind of meal program might look like?
Sure. So one of the things that's important to understand is that we don't really have multiple tiers of quality within our meal programs. So we want every meal program, every meal plan that we sell to be the highest quality. So we don't really have like a good, better, best in terms of the quality of grade of meat that we're going to buy, or the quality of chef we're going to hire, or the quality of ingredients that we're going to use. All of that's going to be a best scenario that we can possibly offer. Where the pricing really changes is on the options of your meal plan. So that means, if you were going to do a breakfast, lunch, and dinner meal plan, then you would have a choice at breakfast to do continental breakfast or hot breakfast. The main difference being that continental is going to be something like going and staying at a Holiday Inn, where you have lots of nice, bagels, cream cheese, fruits, things like that are out, cereals. And going to the hot, you're actually going to have a cook in the kitchen where the guys can come down and say, hey, can I get an omelet with, cheese and ham and bacon? Sure, no problem. 5 minutes later, they have an omelet. They might have some biscuits and gravy out on the buffet with some breakfast potatoes as well. So that's kind of the difference there. And we have some groups who say, you know what, we just don't want to do breakfast at all. We just want to do lunch and dinner. And so most of the time when it comes to pricing, and when you get to a semester price per man, it's really more about which meals do you want to serve. Do you want a Sunday night meal or no? Do you want a Friday night meal or no? We don't recommend Friday night meals because they're not well attended. We'll certainly do them, and we have some customers who request it, but we'd much rather do the Sunday night meal than the Friday, just from an attendance standpoint. And then in terms of pricing, how that works, another question we get a lot of times is, well, what if I'm a smaller chapter? Probably can't afford this. And so what we do for our smaller chapters is, obviously there's a fixed cost of the chef. And the chef is a cost that doesn't go away, regardless of if you have 25 members on the meal plan or you have 75 members on the meal plan. That chef cost is going to be there. If we start getting up into larger numbers, of course, we have to add some support staff to that chef. So it's kind of all relative as it goes up the scale. But what we'll do for our smaller chapters is we can do one of two things. We either, raise the price a little bit, the semester price per man to cover for that chef, or we can keep the price the same as it would be for 75 guys, and then simply charge a chef's fee that covers the difference. And then what's nice about that is any additional out-of-house participation, or if your numbers in your house go up, let's say next semester or next year you're at 30 members instead of 25, all of those will go against the chef fee in the house. And so your chef fee gets reduced or eventually eliminated as you kind of go up the spectrum and your revenue increases. So there are options out there. If you're a house that has a smaller amount of numbers, we can help you. But we're also really well versed in large chapters. And in some of the groups that are in the South and the Midwest that have some of your larger chapter houses, those are some of our stronger areas. And so we have many chapters that are 150 members plus. And one of the biggest things that I think is important when it comes to pricing is the more out-of-house participation that you have, the more successful your meal plan will be. And so we can offer multiple plans for the out-of-house. And it kind of goes back to that question. I forgot to hit on it when we were talking about the profitability of your kitchen. That's a huge factor in your profitability. There's a big difference between a house that has 40 in-house members on the meal plan and that's it, and a house that has 40 in-house members on a full meal plan and 75 out-of-house members eating chapter night and lunch at the house every day. There's a huge revenue difference for the house between those two scenarios. So for us, we can offer multiple meal plans at different price ranges for out-of-house. So maybe they just want to go to chapter night, or maybe they just want to do chapter night and lunches, or maybe they want to do dinner only. So we tend to try to be a little bit more flexible with out-of-house meal plans, and then we require all the in-house guys to be on the same meal plan. So from a pricing standpoint, it really is going to range, kind of depends. But the good news is that we can get you a quote really quickly and a proposal really quickly. It's really a matter of just finding out what is it that you need and what meals do you want to serve. And usually within a day, we can get a price back to you to say, hey, this is what, it would cost to do this on your campus. So.
And that's another great segue to the next question, which is, what about the process of making a change? So what if I've got a contract in place already? What kind of time circumstances are required to make a change?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the unique things that we have that we've invested in our company, and I've mentioned them a couple times, is our training chefs. And what our training chefs do is they do not have a home. They don't have a house that they specifically work in all year. They basically travel the country for us and help us open up new accounts and then train existing chefs. And so I'll give you an example. We had a school that called, or a house that called, fraternity house that called 2 days ago. And said, hey, we're in trouble. We need some help. We've lost our chef. How quickly could we switch to your service? And so we have a training chef that is going to be heading that direction next week, and we'll have them started by the end of the first week of February. So that would be on the short end of how quick can we make a change. We can't promise. If we had 25 chapters that wanted to do that tomorrow, we couldn't pull that off. But as long as it's, a few here and there, we can do that. So sometimes we can help you mid-semester or just with a few weeks notice. In other times, most people like to make a change at semester. And so that typically is the most common time that people will make a change. And so really, it's as simple as putting a contract together. That whole process takes not very long at all. Our contracts are very simple. They're not meant to be full of legal mumbo jumbo. They're just meant to say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what your responsibilities are, and here's what the price is going to be, just so that we're all on the same page. So if you're looking to make a switch for next year, like I guess we're end of January right now. Now you may be listening to this webinar at any point, but really it's best to do it as soon as you can. And the only reason I say that is not for our benefit as much as it is for your benefit. The more time that we have to find your chef and to train your chef and to find that perfect person, the better off we're going to be. And so it's great to have those conversations early. We can keep conversations confidential if you're in a current situation with another company, or if you're in a current situation with a chef that is working in your house. We can keep these conversations confidential. If we need to do a site visit, we can do it on a weekend when your chef is not present at the house. So these are all things that we can work through from a logistical standpoint as well.
I'm going to interject and launch a quick poll real quick. We're talking about the convenience of switching over and when you can do it. There's a poll being out, and you guys can continue on now.
Great. So what are actually the kind of most common times of the year that people are contacting Upper Crust, Adam?
Well, when I first started this business, I said, hey, I told my wife, I said, this is going to be a great business because, we're only going to have to really work hard for about 8 months a year. And then the rest of the year, we're going to be able to relax a little bit. And the reality is that we do all of our planning, hiring, and work during those off periods. So the very most popular time to switch service is to start a new school year fresh. That's by far the most popular, but we're seeing a really large increase in chapters that are switching either mid-semester or during second semester. Obviously, it's easier for you to make that choice if you are not with another company. If you're simply independent, you can basically make that choice anytime you want. If you're with another company, you may have some contractual reasons why you might have to finish a semester or give a certain amount of notice before you can switch. But, really the next few months, if you're watching this webinar anytime in the near future here, February, March, April, and May are really the prime time that people are looking for the following school year. And so I would encourage you to reach out. We'd love to have a conversation with you, at least get a proposal in your hands, and be able to look at pricing and be able to make adjustments to that pricing by talking back and forth. That would be my encouragement. And we have a lot of resources online as well. We have almost 1,000 reviews now from students that have our service that are online between Google and Facebook. And so we have a lot of great stuff on our website, which we'll show that web address here shortly, I think, as well. And so I encourage you guys to go and browse on there, and that may answer some additional questions people have as well.
And I would assume then the same is true if you probably get a little bit of a rush of activity late summer when chapters are figuring out things for the fall, and every once in a while a chef says they're not going to return,
Yes.
and possibly a little bit of activity mid-semester or first semester if things aren't going well and there's some dissatisfaction, trying to make that change in time for second semester. So probably 3 times a year, give or take that.
Absolutely. And don't feel bad if you have a situation. That's one of the benefits of being able to switch to a company, is that a lot of times we get handcuffed. We have a chef that's an independent chef, and it's too hard for us to find another independent chef mid-semester. How do we advertise for their job? How do we interview? How do we do this while somebody's actually cooking in our kitchen? Even if we're unhappy with the food, oftentimes we feel a little bit strapped and handcuffed and say, hey, well, let's just make it to the end of the semester. And what ends up happening is we have, another 2 or 3 months that we have to endure food service that isn't meeting the needs of the men that are living in the house. And so that's what's so great about a food service company and switching with us, is that you can call us and we can get you out of that situation relatively quickly. And make a transition where, the men, we tell people all the time, and everyone on this call will be able to relate to this: if the food is great and the Wi-Fi is fast and works well, your complaints for a corporation board will be slim to none. And so we can help you with the food part. I can't help you with the Wi-Fi. But I hope your Wi-Fi is good, because that's what our iPad for our app hooks up to. So I do hope I do hope your Wi-Fi works well.
Well, we've got, I think I just probably have 2 more questions for you, Adam. So let's talk about, we can go to the next slide, Thomas. What if our kitchen needs some help? What do you offer in the way of remodeling support, or maybe we're doing a remodel and we want to take our kitchen up to the next level? Can you help with that? Can you help with equipment? Tell us about that.
Sure. So one thing that we find is, especially as we're seeing across the country all of these fantastic houses being built and also remodeled, and we know that that's something that's important. And what we find too is we work a lot with architects now, and we've just started building some great relationships with these folks, because at the end of the day, when they look at a blueprint of a kitchen, they're filling spaces with equipment that fits well. And so they're looking at this box that's 5 feet long. They're not thinking about what that box does, or its importance in the kitchen, or how that grill that's 5 feet long relates to where the refrigerator is. And so a lot of times, not that they don't do a great job, they certainly have the best intentions in mind, but they might design a kitchen that works on a piece of paper, but might not be real functional in terms of a working kitchen. And so what we can do is we can come in and we can work with you, with your architect, and say, okay, let's take a look at these plans. Let's show you some photos and some ideas from chapters that we work with across the country in terms of best practices, right? How do we set up the buffet? What type of equipment works best? We can also sometimes save people money because there's a lot of times that the group that you're working with might say, oh, great, we're building a new kitchen. We need all of these new items, and we can say to them, hey, yeah, we need new items on these 3, but a used stovetop would work fine in here, unless you just want to spend the money. You could save $5,000 here. Or your house really isn't big enough to need a combi oven. This isn't something that you really need. A regular single stack convection oven would be fine for you in this situation. And so we can work with you there as well. And if you need a few upgrades, if you're not doing a full remodel, we can come into your kitchen, take a look at it, and say, hey, here's what needs to be done to get your kitchen ready to go, from smallwares, plates, and tongs and forks, all the way up to equipment.
That's great. So, and that's such a valuable service, brothers, as you can imagine, trying to understand what kitchen equipment can be purchased, used, or new, and what's the great value. That's not usually something that's in our wheelhouse of expertise. So that's a great support that you can provide, Adam. Thank you. One last question that I have, and that is, a lot of times when transitions happen, it's because things aren't going great. And if things aren't going great, that oftentimes means that the kitchen might not have been kept up to standard. So Is it common for chapters, to have to spend some money to get their kitchen prepared for a company like yours to be able to come in and operate?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that we do when we take over a new contract is we come in and we do a deep clean of the kitchen. And that usually is the biggest issue coming in, is that the kitchen has been a little bit neglected by the previous staff. Things have never been pulled away from the walls. Items have never really been deep cleaned. And so we start there. And once we get the kitchen cleaned, organized, and in the way that we need it to be, then we can sort of take an inventory of what you have and what you might need. In most cases, this ends up being a list of smallwares, items that a chef needs in a kitchen in order to prepare great food, meaning, tongs and spoons and whisks and different size pots and things like that maybe you might have lost over the years, or maybe your previous chef wasn't cooking very much from scratch, and so it just wasn't necessary for them to have a big pot, because they were ordering sauce out of number 10 cans and opening it and pouring it onto the chicken, right? So there are some things like that may come up. In terms of larger purchases and kitchen equipment, I can tell you, we work in kitchens large and small, beautiful brand new kitchens and kitchens that are 60, 70, 80 years old. So I don't think that there's any surprises that we would find, and we certainly do not need the kitchen to be a showplace. In terms of everything being shiny and new. We just want things to be clean and sanitary and in working condition. And so we can help you with those types of things. I had a fraternity we took over this last week that had an issue with their oven. They just didn't know the right questions to ask to get their oven fixed. And we were able to get in and get the oven fixed within a week of being there, because we knew what was wrong with it. We knew what was happening there. And of course, the corporation board, they just knew it wasn't working right, but didn't really know what was wrong. So those are the kinds of things that we can do. And we'll certainly, work within your budget. We've had houses that have come to us and said, hey, we know we need some stuff, but here's how much money we can spend right now. We have $1,000 and that's what we can spend. And so we're going to prioritize at that point. Hey, here's the things that we need. And then next semester, maybe we can get another handful of things. And then next thing you know, 2 years later, you've got a fully equipped, beautiful kitchen that, we can do anything we need out of.
Well, great. That's a relief, and it's neat that I think you obviously recognize that you're going to have to come in and clean and get things to your standard, and then be able to take over and operate smoothly. So, brothers, that's I think a great introduction to Upper Crust Food Service. On the screen right now, you'll see a link to their website. We also have contact information for Shana Smith, who was at the Academy, if you stop by their table, and she was terrific. So I want to open it up to any questions that anybody might have had, if there's something that we didn't cover.
If you guys have any questions, just type them into the question box and I'll get them answered. In the meantime, I'm going to run one last poll that should be on your screen currently. So we'll look out for some questions as well.
Adam, here comes one question, and that is, we talked about chef as staff, but we didn't talk about servers, hashers, dishwashers. Are those things that fall under the Upper Crust program, or are those things that the chapter would still handle?
Yes, so our goal is to allow the chapter to get out of the staffing business. So that means that if we need to have hashers, if we need to have a dishwasher, kind of as we talked about, as these meal programs step up. So usually if you have, a little bit larger chapter size, then you're going to have things like maybe an additional line cook or a full-time utility person that does dishes, things of that nature. So we would prefer to take all of those staff members on under our payroll and include those in the cost of the proposal. that would be our preference. We do have a few fraternity houses here and there that have hashing as part of their program in the house. And we will work with chapters if it's part of your tradition to have members in the house that assist in the kitchen, doing dishes, things like that. We can work with you on that if that's something that's important to you as well.
Great. We kind of touched on this, I think, earlier, but we have another question that says, so what if my chef needs to leave mid-year or has an emergency? I think you mentioned that you have some of your staff available, but just touch on that real quick.
Yeah, so if the question is, once you were contracted with us, how would we handle that? I can sort of answer that both ways. So if that's the question, then if you are contracted with us and your chef has a medical emergency or something that is an excusable situation, then we would have one of our training chefs and or regional managers that would make it to campus. The very worst case scenario that you would have would be if it took us, that evening, let's say that someone had to leave at lunchtime and we weren't going to be able to have somebody there till the following morning. We would order food out for the house. We would order pizza or Jimmy John's or something along those lines. So that would not be something you would have to do or be concerned with, and that would be at our cost because it's our responsibility to make sure you get fed dinner that night. And then the training chef would take over for the next 2 days or whatever the case was while the chef was absent. If your question is, what happens if my chef is going to be gone? Could you guys come in and fill in on a short-term basis for us? That's not really something that we offer right now. We really, we want all of our resources to be going to our, full-time contracted partners that are under contract with us.
Yeah, that's great. I think it was the former, so that was perfect. Let's see, we have another question. You mentioned in your presentation about your training chefs. How often would a chapter that's under contract expect to have somebody from Upper Crust management team in the facility to see what was going on?
Sure. So the way our structure works, and I can kind of take you through the structure, is you have your house chef, or I guess any support staff that's in the house, dishwashers, line cooks, things of that nature. You have your head chef who kind of is in charge of the kitchen. On top of them would be a regional manager. And that regional manager, in many cases, is only the manager for the campus that you're on. So if this is a campus where we have multiple accounts on one campus, we will have a regional manager who lives in that town, who does nothing but manage those set of accounts. And in that type of situation, you may have a manager in your house on a daily basis. The next step up from the regional manager is the regional director. And we have 5 regional directors nationwide. And so they basically usually have a 4 or 5 state region where all of the regional managers report to them, but they are on the road 5 days a week. So they are hitting a different campus 2 or 3 days at a time. And so you would expect to see a regional director probably every couple of weeks or so, every 2 or 3 weeks coming through and checking on everything. And then in terms of the training chef, we really send the training chefs on an as-needed basis. So we basically send them on assignment if we're opening a new house. They will stay until everybody's satisfied and everyone is trained. Or if we're having an issue, let's say we're having an issue with a chef at a house and maybe there's some quality concerns or some things that aren't going the way that we want them to go, we will send that training chef in until that situation is resolved. Another thing I think that's unique about us is, I'm the president of the company, and every corporation board that we work with has direct access to me. And that's really important to me because I want to be able to hear the good or also hear if there's a problem. We will not claim to be perfect. There's no company out there that can be perfect when it comes to food because there's too many variables and too many things going on. But what we can commit to is solving problems quickly. And so if you bring us something, that's one thing that from the top down at our company, we feel really good about is that we solve problems quickly. And that's our goal, is to create a long-standing relationship with our customers built on that trust.
We have one more written question too. Someone wrote in, we're geography challenged, like in central Maine. Is that an issue? You mentioned you're nationwide, but are the remote areas of the country a problem for any part of the business?
So the biggest thing that we notice with some of the remote areas are just when it comes down to pricing. If generally speaking, the less populated areas or more remote areas, we typically do not see quite as high numbers on a meal plan. Now, I don't want to say that that's 100% the case always, but that's just something that we have to take into consideration, and that's why we do a separate proposal for every house. So if you're in Maine, that's no problem at all. Actually, my grandpa's from Millinocket, so I'd love to be able to travel up there and say hi. That's no issue if you're there. You're in North Dakota or South Dakota or Wyoming or wherever you might be. As long as we can find a pricing structure that allows us to put a full-time chef in your kitchen, because that's really where the key is. We need a really quality person that's going to show up every day, because what we don't want to get into the situation of is having to send a regional manager to a remote location to fill in. We want to send a regional manager to a remote location to check in, not to fill in.
Great, Thomas. Any other questions?
Nope, those are all the written ones.
Super. Brothers, we thank you for joining us on this webinar. We called this a new approach to kitchen operations, and I hope you can see why we did that. The idea of not being in the HR and payroll and workman's comp business, running our house corporations, the not needing to be or trying to be experts in food service, when most times our brothers that are volunteering on the House Corporation Board aren't trained or skilled in that. This model really makes a lot of sense and should free us up to focus on things that we can impact, that improve the quality of the housing experience for our brothers. So we encourage you to look at this further and contact Upper Crust with any questions you have. That information is on your screen, and of course you can always call headquarters and speak with Thomas Lovejoy. And Thomas, thanks for setting this up and supporting us through this.
Of course.
All right, good night, brothers.